Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, February 27th, and this week we are talking everything Robo-Taxis. And as always, Legal Rideshare breaks it down. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Bryant, happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Jared. Great to be back and excited to talk about Robo-Taxis. There's a lot of big news coming out nationwide and particularly locally here in Chicago. So I'm excited to get going.
Yeah, last time we were talking to Torsten, we ran out of time to talk about this. And, it's obviously vital. And just like you said, we're talking about Robo-Taxis specifically today because especially in Illinois, they're mapping. So Waymo is approaching Chicago/Illinois. So it's now hitting the Midwest. It is here. So I thought it'd be a good time to discuss the ins and outs, the good and bads, the gray areas of robo-taxis, and just help people understand where they're at, where the dangers are, and really what to expect. And I think a lot of this information is not out yet. As we saw, I believe yesterday, the Tribune, posted kind of the first article saying, hey, they're coming. There's a lot of questions in Springfield. And so let's dive in. The first thing is, what do you hear on your end as far as drivers and who you've talked to? What is sort of the current mood about the Waymos as far as passenger drivers? Are you hearing anything in particular?
Yeah, so we talk to drivers and passengers all the time, and we have contacts nationwide. So we have our finger on the pulse, I think, in terms of how people are feeling about this new technology. On the passenger side, it seems like there's a lot of excitement. It seems like people are ready to try the new technology. We've already seen stories where people are willing to actually pay more for the robo-taxi experience. This is, I think, welcomed in the rider community. As it relates to the drivers, it's much more complicated. And I think they really see AVs as a threat to the industry. They see their jobs at risk. Ultimately, the companies, I think, have been clear that the long-term goal is to replace drivers with robo-taxis and transform rideshare into a completely autonomous experience. I don't think that's going to be anytime in the immediate near future, but long-term, that's the goal. And that's, I think, where drivers are pretty anxious.
Yeah, and we've always talked about robo-taxis in general, but we are even seeing a shift from novelty to reality. And a lot of this is what you had just talked about. There was an article which I pulled up here from Business Insider that showcasing, one of the things about Waymo has always been, well, it's so much more expensive than, an Uber or Lyft driver. So, Uber and Lyft drivers are safe. But this Business Insider article from just a couple weeks ago is showing that gap is seriously closing already. And so what we're seeing now is, like you said, it seems like the passenger side is very excited. But now it's not just excitement on a novelty, it's excitement on this is actually becoming affordable or soon to be affordable. And so what does that mean for drivers now? So we're seeing that sort of shift and we're seeing frustrations, and rightfully so. And as usual, a lot of the big rideshare companies are being not too transparent about their ultimate goals on what they want to do. So I understand, in terms of the vibe of really what's happening with robo-taxis, there's frustration, there's uncertainty, and then on the other side, there's excitement.
Right. Yeah, we'll see how quickly things change, but ultimately, I think that this excitement on the consumer base is going to be driving the rideshare companies' decisions. Not to mention them being extremely cost effective when the technology is ultimately perfected. If they don't have to pay the driver and they can have a vehicle on the road all the time, perhaps an electric vehicle who they don't have to gas up all the time, it's going to be much cheaper to put rides, on the streets, to complete those rides for the passengers. And I think the companies see a real opportunity to pad their pockets by getting rid of a lot of the operating costs, while perhaps even making a cheaper experience for the passengers. So the drivers are going to be the ones that get squeezed out, while the companies are making a ton of money and the passengers are perhaps having an even cheaper experience.
Yeah, and we're one of the things we're really seeing right now too is there seems to be a lot of gray areas in legal issues, and again uncertainty, just in general about how these operate. And you and I have discussed in length about the idea of again disrupting the rideshare market. Although this time there is no course correcting with the human. If something goes wrong, it really goes wrong. I'm sure you saw the article. I think this came out a week or two ago, maybe even less, where they're now hiring gig workers to shut the doors for Waymos because they're not shutting or opening them because they're not doing it. We just saw recently that New York is straight up refusing robo-taxis. So my question to you is, at this moment, what are the obvious, gray areas or legal issues just in general over the whole robo-taxi Waymo experience?
Well, the biggest one that we're concerned about is safety and what happens when things do go wrong. So, as with any technology, any transportation, there are going to be events. There are going to be accidents. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be fatalities. It's a fact of life. I don't care how safe these vehicles are. I don't care if they're quote unquote perfect sometime down the line. Things happen. And when these tragedies and casualties and bodily injuries occur, we want to know, how are the companies going to be held accountable? In a traditional car accident, we know exactly what happens. We know the tort law in place is going to make this an insurance claim where the at-fault driver has to pay for the damages, usually through their insurance policy, where people's medical bills get covered, people's lost wages get covered, pain and suffering is taken care of. In these situations, there is no driver. We don't know exactly who is going to be found negligent or responsible for a crash. And that question is really very important, because if we don't know who to hold accountable, then we don't know how people who are injured are going to be made whole. There are two paths that I really see in the future, and we're going to have to choose one. One, are we going to treat these accidents just like every other car accident and have these vehicles insured, through a regular insurance policy? And if they are involved in an accident, then the injured person's just going to be able to go down that path, as we all know. Alternatively, are these going to be treated as different types of events where their product's liability, the technology failed, the vehicle was defective? And those are much different claims, much more costly claims to litigate, and ultimately much harder for people to recover damages from. So if we go down that path, if these are treated as products liability claims, injured people are going to have a very difficult time being made whole by the injuries that were caused by these cars. So that was a long-winded answer, but that's really where I'm concerned in terms of the legality and legal issues that are coming up with these vehicles, where policy needs to be decided right away before these cars hit the street, so that we know how injured people are going to be made whole when safety is not effectuated and the system has failed.
Which really brings me to my next question here, and I think the most crucial, especially for legal rideshare, is, if I'm a passenger in a Waymo and I'm injured in Chicago, what do I do? Because as you said, it's a little bit different now. There's no driver. It's a different situation. What should a passenger do who's injured in a Waymo in Chicago?
Well, the first thing you should do is call us so that you can have a free consultation as to how to handle the event. We need to make sure that we're gathering all the evidence that we can from the scene, take pictures, call the police. It might seem silly. You're in an autonomous vehicle and you're calling the police officer to make a report, like on what? The driverless car? Yes, we need to document what happened, where the vehicle is, where the collision point was. Perhaps it's another driver on the roadway that caused the crash, and that would be the primary focus, their insurance policy. Perhaps it was a single car accident where the robo-taxi drove into a light pole. All of these different factors need to be documented and investigated so that we can make sure that we're going down the correct path and that we're seeking recovery from the responsible parties. And in the case of an autonomous vehicle, as you're describing, Jared, we're going to file claims and suits if we have to against anyone and everyone involved to make sure that you recover for your damages. No matter where that leads us, whether it's that standard insurance policy that we were talking about, or whether we need to make that claim against Waymo based on their product, based on their faulty technology. We will follow the facts. We will investigate it. We'll make sure that you get the compensation that you deserve.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that would be the same even if let's say you're an Uber driver and you get hit by a Waymo, or you're just another driver and a Waymo causes an accident. Is it still the same process in Chicago if that happens?
It's exactly the same. So if you are involved in any sort of Waymo-related accident, any autonomous vehicle claim, you want to contact us, because it's the investigation at the beginning that sets the foundation for the case. It's opening the claims with the correct insurance companies. It's following the facts wherever they lead, and ensuring that whatever damage that you've sustained, whether it's damage to your car, damage to your person, damage to your livelihood, that we're seeking compensation to ensure that you recover everything that you've lost.
Got it. Well, yeah. I mean, Bryant, this has really been very informational. I think we could probably even talk about this more in length, specifically about, some of the areas with the injuries and accidents. But, because it's so fresh, because this is so new, we just have to keep talking about it, because there's so much uncertainty, as you said, in which way is this going to go? Is this going to be, like you said, a technical malfunction, or is this going to be a car accident? And so we just don't know, but obviously we're going to be here to help, and of course, before we head into the weekend, I'm definitely going to give you the final say to let people know, hey, if this stuff happens, what do they do?
Yeah, if you find yourself involved in an accident, I would urge you to contact LegalRideshare right away. You can find all of our contact information on LegalRideshare.com. We will help you recover for anything that you've lost, whether it's the cost of medical treatment, lost wages, pain and suffering, whatever damage that you've sustained. We're going to fight to make sure that you are fully compensated for those injuries. LegalRideshare.com, and consultations are always free.
Thank you, Bryant. And as I like to say, that is the end of This Week in Rideshare. See you next week.